The morning at Galactic Academy started like any other day. Students from 12 different planets sat in the large classroom. Some had blue skin. Some had 4 arms. Some floated in special water tanks. But most of them were human because Earth had become an important member of the galactic community just 50 years ago. Sat in the back row near the window. She was a small girl with short black hair and calm eyes. She wore the standard gray uniform of the academy, and she kept her books organized in a neat pile on her desk. While other students talked and laughed before class started, quietly read her notes from yesterday's lesson. Her friend sat next to her. He was tall and thin, with messy hair that he never bothered to fix. He leaned over to look at her notes. "You study too much," he said with a smile. "The test is not until next week." Did not look up from her reading. "I like to be ready," she said simply. Shook his head and laughed. He had known since they were children on Earth. She had always been quiet and serious. But he also knew something that most people did not know about her. He knew about her family and their long history. He knew why she was always so calm. The teacher, Professor, walked into the room. He was an older human man with gray hair and kind eyes. He taught combat theory, which was the study of fighting strategies used across the galaxy. It was not a class about actually fighting. It was about understanding how different species thought about war. "Good morning, everyone," Professor said. "Today we will discuss the Battle of the 7 Moons. Please open your books to page 234. Students began to open their books, but before anyone could find the right page, the door of the classroom exploded inward. The metal door flew across the room and crashed into the wall. Students screamed and jumped from their seats. Some of the alien students used their natural abilities to protect themselves. A student from the water planet created a shield of ice. A student with 4 arms grabbed 3 classmates and pulled them under a desk. But did not move. She looked up from her notes with calm eyes and watched the doorway. A massive figure walked through the broken entrance. He was over 2 meters tall, with dark gray skin that looked like stone. His eyes glowed orange like fire. He wore black armor covered in medals and symbols of rank. Behind him walked 6 soldiers, each one carrying weapons that hummed with energy. Professor stepped forward. His hands were shaking, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "This is a place of learning," he said. "You have no right to." The large figure raised one hand, and Professor flew backward. An invisible force pushed him against the wall and held him there. The professor could not move or speak. "I am General of the Empire," the figure announced. His voice was deep and loud, like thunder rolling across mountains. "I have come to deliver a message to the humans of Earth." The classroom was silent. Every student stared at the general with wide, frightened eyes. The Empire was known across the galaxy as a civilization of warriors. They had conquered dozens of planets. They believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. General walked slowly through the classroom. His heavy boots made the floor shake with each step. He looked at the human students with disgust in his glowing eyes. "Your species is weak," he said. "You have soft bodies. You live short lives. You feel pain and fear like small animals. And yet you dare to sit as equals with the great civilizations of the galaxy." He stopped in the middle of the room and turned in a slow circle, looking at each student. "The Empire does not accept this. We do not believe that humans deserve their place among the stars, so I am here to prove the truth to everyone." General raised his voice so that it echoed through the halls of the academy. "I challenge Earth to send one warrior to fight me in single combat. If your warrior wins, the Empire will recognize humans as worthy. But if your warrior loses, or if no one comes forward, then Earth will face consequences. We will place sanctions on your planet. We will block your trade routes. We will make sure that everyone in the galaxy knows that humans are cowards." The students looked at each other in fear. No one spoke. No one moved. Fighting a general was the same as asking to die. They were born warriors. They trained from childhood. Their bodies were stronger than steel. General laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. "Look at them," he said to his soldiers. "They shake like leaves in the wind. Is there no human here who will accept my challenge? Is there no human with even a small amount of courage?" Silence filled the room. Some students looked down at their desks. Others looked at the windows, wishing they could escape. The fear was so thick that it felt hard to breathe. Felt his heart beating fast. He wanted to do something, but his body would not move. He was frozen by terror like everyone else. Then he heard a small sound next to him. It was the sound of a book closing. He turned his head and saw placing her notes carefully on her desk. She arranged them in a neat pile, just like she always did. Then she stood up from her chair. The movement was so calm and natural that it took a moment for anyone to notice. But when General saw the small human girl standing up, he turned to face her. "What is this?" he asked with amusement in his voice. "A child wishes to speak." Did not answer immediately. She straightened her uniform and pushed her chair neatly under the desk. Then she began to walk toward the general. Every step she took was steady and unhurried. Her face showed no fear. Her hands did not shake. She walked as if she was simply going to the front of the class to answer a question. Grabbed her arm as she passed. "Don't," he whispered desperately. "You can't fight him, no one can." Looked at her friend. For a moment, something soft appeared in her eyes. She placed her hand gently over his. "Someone has to," she said quietly, "and I am not afraid." She pulled her arm free and continued walking. General watched her approach with growing confusion. This tiny human girl showed no reaction to his presence. She did not tremble. She did not cry. She did not look away from his glowing eyes. When reached the front of the classroom, she stopped a few meters away from the general. She was so small compared to him that she barely reached his chest. "I accept your challenge," she said. Her voice was clear and steady. The room fell completely silent. Even the soldiers looked surprised. General stared at the girl for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. It was a loud, booming laugh that shook the walls. "You," he said between laughs, "a little girl who looks like she could break in a strong wind. This is the best that humanity can offer." Did not react to his mockery. She simply waited for him to finish laughing. When the general finally stopped, he leaned down to look at her more closely. His orange eyes burned with cruel amusement. "Do you understand what you are asking for, child? I have killed warriors 3 times your size. I have conquered planets. I have never lost a single combat in my entire life." Met his gaze without blinking. "I understand," she said calmly. "I request 1 day to prepare. That is my only condition." General straightened up and looked at his soldiers. They were all smiling, enjoying what they saw as a joke. "1 day," the general repeated. "You want 1 day to prepare for your death?" "Yes," said simply. General nodded slowly. The amusement never left his face. "Very well, little human. I will give you your 1 day. Tomorrow at sunset, we will fight in the central arena. The entire galaxy will watch you fall." He turned and walked toward the broken doorway. His soldiers followed him, their weapons still humming with energy. At the door, General stopped and looked back at one last time. "I almost feel sorry for you," he said. "Almost." Then he was gone. The classroom remained frozen in silence. Professor fell from the wall as the invisible force released him. Students slowly emerged from under desks and behind shields. Everyone stared at. She stood alone in the front of the room, her small figure perfectly still. Her face was calm, as if nothing unusual had happened, as if she had not just volunteered to fight the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy. Then, without a word, she walked back to her seat, sat down, and opened her notes again. Watched her with his mouth open. His hands were still shaking. He whispered, "What have you done?" She did not look up from her reading. "What needed to be done," she said quietly. "Now let me study. I only have one day." The news spread across the galaxy within hours. Every news station, every information network, every communication channel carried the same story. A human girl had accepted the challenge of general. A student with no military training had volunteered to fight one of the most feared warriors in known space. Most beings in the galaxy thought it was a joke. They laughed at the foolishness of humans. They made cruel predictions about how quickly the girl would die. Betting markets opened, and the odds against her were so high that they seemed meaningless. But on Earth, no one was laughing. In the academy dormitory, students gathered in small groups and spoke in worried whispers. They did not know well. She was always quiet, always alone except for. But now they felt connected to her in a way they had never expected. Her fate had become the fate of their entire species. Sat outside's room. He had been sitting there for 3 hours, waiting for her to open the door. She had locked herself inside as soon as she returned from class, and she had not made a single sound. He called through the door for the 100th time. "Please talk to me. We need to find another way. We can call the military. We can ask the Galactic Council for help. You don't have to do this alone." There was no answer. Pressed his forehead against the cold metal of the door. His eyes were red from holding back tears. He had known his entire life. They had grown up in the same small town on Earth. They had played together as children, studied together as teenagers, and come to the academy together as young adults. He remembered the first time he had seen her fight. They were 12 years old, and a group of older boys had been bothering him in the park, had appeared out of nowhere. She was smaller than all of them, but she moved like water flowing around stones. In less than a minute, all 3 boys were on the ground and was helping to his feet. She had never explained where she learned to fight. She had never talked about her family's history, but had eventually learned the truth from his own parents. The family had been martial artists for over 300 years. They had developed their own style of combat, passed down from parent to child through generations. It was a style that focused not on strength, but on using an opponent's power against them. But this was different. This was not a fight against schoolyard bullies. This was a fight against a general who had destroyed armies. Whispered, "Please." Finally, the door opened. Stood in the doorway wearing simple training clothes. Her hair was tied back and her eyes were focused and clear. She did not look frightened. She did not look worried. She looked exactly the same as she always did. "You should not sit on the cold floor," she said. "It is bad for your health." Jumped to his feet. "How can you think about my health right now? You just agreed to fight a monster. He's going to kill you. He's going to." Raised one hand and stopped talking. It was a gentle motion, but it carried a quiet authority that he could not ignore. "Come inside," she said. "I want to show you something." Followed her into the small room. It was neat and organized like everything owned. A single bed, a simple desk, a closet with clothes arranged by color. But on the floor in the center of the room, she had laid out a thin mat. Walked to the mat and knelt down in the middle of it. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. "Sit," she said. Sat across from her, crossing his legs awkwardly. He did not understand what was happening, but he knew better than to interrupt. "Do you know why I never told you about my family?" asked with her eyes still closed. Shook his head, then realized she could not see him. "No," he said quietly. "Because I was afraid you would look at me differently. My family has a long history. We have trained warriors for centuries, but we never fought for glory or fame. We fought to protect those who could not protect themselves." She opened her eyes and looked at him directly. "When I was 7 years old, my grandmother began teaching me. Every morning before school, I would practice with her. She taught me how to move, how to breathe, how to see what others cannot see. She taught me that true strength is not about having power. It is about knowing when and how to use it." listened in silence. In all their years of friendship, had never spoken this much about herself. My grandmother fought in the First Contact War, continued. When they tried to invade Earth 40 years ago, she was part of the defense force. She faced warriors like General. She survived. But she had an army with her, said, "You will be alone." Smiled slightly. It was a small, sad smile that made his heart ache. "I will not be alone," she said. "Everyone I have ever loved will be with me in that arena. Every lesson my grandmother taught me, every hour I spent training, every moment of my life has prepared me for tomorrow." She reached out and took his hand. "I am not doing this because I want to be a hero. I am doing this because I am the only one who can. If I do not fight, the general will hurt our people. He will make us look weak in front of the entire galaxy. And then more enemies will come, thinking we are easy targets." Felt tears forming in his eyes. "But what if you lose? What if you die?" Squeezed his hand gently. "Then I will die with honor, fighting for something that matters. That is all anyone can ask for." The two friends sat together in silence for a long time. Outside the window, the sun was setting. The sky turned orange and pink, and then slowly faded to darkness. Finally spoke again. His voice was rough with emotion. "Is there anything I can do? Anything at all?" Nodded. "Yes. Tomorrow I want you to watch the fight. I want you to see everything that happens. And no matter what the result is, I want you to tell people the truth about what you see. The truth. That humans are not weak. That we face our fears instead of running from them. That we protect each other, even when it costs us everything." Stood up and walked to her window. She looked out at the stars filling the night sky. "General thinks he understands humans," she said quietly. "He thinks we are soft because we feel pain. He thinks we are cowardly because we feel fear. But he is wrong." She turned to face. "Pain and fear are not weaknesses. They are reminders that we have something worth protecting. A being who feels nothing has nothing to fight for. But a human who loves, who hopes, who fears, that human will fight until their last breath." Wiped his eyes and stood up. He walked to and wrapped his arms around her in a tight hug. She was so small in his arms, so fragile, and yet he could feel a strength inside her that he did not fully understand. "I believe in you," he whispered. "I have always believed in you." Hugged him back for a moment, then she gently pulled away. "Thank you, now go and rest. I have a long night of preparation ahead of me." Wanted to argue. He wanted to stay with her, to be close to her for as long as possible. But he saw the determination in her eyes, and he knew that she needed to be alone. "Good night," he said as he walked to the door. "Good night, my friend," she replied. After left, returned to the mat in the center of her room. She sat down, closed her eyes, and began to breathe slowly. In her mind, she saw her grandmother's face. She was an old woman with silver hair and eyes that sparkled with wisdom and strength. She had died 3 years ago, but still felt her presence every day. "I am scared, grandmother," whispered in the darkness. "I am more scared than I have ever been." There was no answer, of course. Her grandmother was gone, but somehow felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling of comfort and courage that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. She remembered her grandmother's final words, spoken on her deathbed. "Fear is not your enemy, little one. Fear is a gift. It tells you that something important is at stake. Let it sharpen your mind. Let it strengthen your heart. And then do what you must do, regardless of the fear." Opened her eyes. The fear was still there, sitting in her stomach like a cold stone. But above the fear, she felt something else, something stronger. Purpose. She stood up and began to move through the forms her grandmother had taught her. Each motion flowed into the next like water in a stream. Her body remembered what her mind could not always recall. Every punch, every kick, every turn, they were all part of her now, written into her muscles and bones. She practiced through the night, stopping only to drink water and rest her muscles. When the first light of dawn appeared in the window, she was still moving, still training, still preparing. In a few hours, she would face the greatest challenge of her life. She would stand alone against a monster who had never known defeat. And she would show the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. The central arena of the Galactic Academy was the largest structure on the campus. It could hold 50,000 beings from hundreds of different species. The seats rose up in endless circles, and massive screens floated in the air so that everyone could see what happened on the fighting floor. Today, every seat was filled. Beings from across the galaxy had traveled to witness this moment. They came from the cold ice worlds of the outer rim and the burning desert planets near the galactic core. They came from underwater civilizations and floating cloud cities. They all wanted to see the same thing, a human girl fighting a general. Most of them expected to see a quick and brutal death. The betting odds against had grown even higher overnight. Some stations were even calling the fight the execution instead of the challenge. But not everyone believed would lose. In the human section of the arena, thousands of students, teachers, and diplomats sat in nervous silence. They wore the blue and silver colors of Earth, and they held small flags and banners. Some of them prayed. Others held hands with their neighbors. All of them watched the empty fighting floor with desperate hope in their eyes. Sat in the front row of the human section. His hands were pressed together so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Next to him sat Professor, who had been released from the medical center that morning. His face was pale, but he had refused to miss the fight. "She trained all night," said quietly. "I saw her through the window. She never stopped moving." Professor nodded slowly. "I have read about her family in the historical records. The style of martial arts is legendary among combat scholars. It was developed specifically to defeat larger and stronger opponents." "But can it defeat a?" Professor did not answer. He did not want to give false hope, but he also did not want to speak his fears out loud. A deep horn sounded across the arena. The noise was so loud that it vibrated through the seats and into the bones of everyone watching. The fight was about to begin. The eastern gate of the arena opened first. General walked through the massive doorway with slow, confident steps. He wore his black armor, but now it was decorated with red symbols that glowed like hot coals. In his right hand, he carried a massive battle axe. The weapon was almost as tall as a human, and its blade shimmered with an unnatural light. The supporters in the arena, thousands of warriors from a dozen conquered planets, began to chant and stomp their feet. The sound was like thunder, shaking the very foundation of the structure. General walked to the center of the fighting floor and raised his axe above his head. His orange eyes scanned the crowd, drinking in their fear and admiration. "Today," he announced, his voice amplified by invisible technology, "I will demonstrate the weakness of humanity. I will show the galaxy that these soft creatures do not deserve their place among the stars. And when their champion falls, Earth will learn humility." The cheering from the supporters grew even louder. They chanted its name until it echoed off every wall. Then the western gate opened. Walked onto the fighting floor. She was so small compared to the general that the cameras had to adjust their focus. She wore simple white training clothes, a loose jacket and pants tied with a black belt. Her feet were bare. She carried no weapons. Her short black hair was tied back with a simple band, and her face was completely calm. For a moment, the entire arena fell silent. No one could believe what they were seeing. Then the laughter began. It started with the warriors and spread through the crowd. Beings from all species pointed at the tiny human girl and laughed until tears ran down their faces. Even some of the aliens who had no love for the Empire could not help but smile at the ridiculous difference between the two fighters. General laughed loudest of all. "This," he said, pointing his axe at, "this is what humanity sends to defend their honor, a child in pajamas, did not react to the mockery. She walked steadily toward the center of the floor, her bare feet making no sound on the stone. When she reached a spot about 10 meters from the general, she stopped and bowed deeply. It was a traditional bow of respect, the kind that martial artists on Earth gave to their opponents before a match. But to the laughing crowd, it looked like she was already surrendering. General shook his head with amusement. "Little human," he said, "do you understand what is about to happen? I will crush you like an insect beneath my boot. Your bones will break. Your blood will stain this floor, and your people will weep as they watch their pathetic champion die." Finished her bow and stood straight. For the first time since entering the arena, she spoke. "Thank you for this opportunity," she said. Her voice was soft, but the arena's technology carried it to every ear. "I have waited my whole life for a fight like this." The laughter in the crowd became uncertain. There was something in the girl's voice, something strange and unexpected. It was not fear, it was not resignation. It sounded almost like anticipation. General frowned. He had broken warriors with his words before. He had made powerful fighters surrender just by describing what he would do to them. But this small girl showed no reaction at all. "You mock me," he growled. "You dare to pretend that you are not afraid." Tilted her head slightly, as if considering his question. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am very afraid. My heart is beating fast and my hands want to shake. I know that you are stronger than me. I know that you have killed many people. I know that I might die in the next few minutes." She paused and took a slow breath. "But fear does not control me. I control me, and I choose to stand here anyway." The arena grew quiet. Even the supporters stopped chanting. There was a weight in words that demanded attention. General's eyes narrowed. For just a moment, a single heartbeat, he felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt uncertain. But then he shook his head and laughed again, though the sound was less confident than before. "Brave words from a doomed child. Let us see if you can speak so clearly when my axe is at your throat." He turned to the floating platform, where the arena officials sat. "I am ready," he announced. "Let the fight begin." The officials looked at. She nodded once calmly. A loud bell rang across the arena. The fight had officially started. General did not waste time. He charged forward like a mountain coming to life, his heavy boots cracking the stone floor. His axe swung in a wide arc that could have cut through steel. But when the blade reached where had been standing, she was no longer there. She had moved at the last possible second, stepping just far enough to let the axe pass by her body. The blade missed her by less than a centimeter. The wind from the swing blew her hair back. The crowd gasped. General spun around, confused. He had never seen anyone move so precisely. It was not a dodge, it was an insult. She had waited until the very last moment, showing that she had no fear of his weapon. He attacked again, faster this time. 3 powerful swings aimed at different parts of her body. Each one could have ended the fight instantly. Flowed around every attack like water flowing around rocks. She did not run away or create distance. She stayed close to the general, moving in and out of his reach as if she was dancing. In the human section, grabbed Professor's arm. "She's doing it," he whispered. "She's using the water form." Professor leaned forward in his seat. His eyes were wide with amazement. "I have only read about this technique," he said. "I never thought I would see it in person. She is not trying to block his strength, she is redirecting it. Every time he attacks, he is wasting his own energy." General was beginning to realize the same thing. Sweat formed on his stone-like skin. His breathing became heavier. Every swing of his massive axe used tremendous energy, but he had hit nothing but air. The girl was making him look foolish. Anger boiled up inside him. He had never felt this kind of frustration before. He had conquered planets, destroyed armies, and defeated champions from 100 species. And now a tiny human in white clothes was making him swing at shadows. "Stand still and fight," he roared. "Face me like a true warrior." Stopped moving. She stood perfectly still, just 3 meters away from the general. "Very well," she said calmly. "I will show you how humans fight." And then she attacked. No one in the arena expected what happened next. Moved forward like an arrow released from a bow. She was so fast that the cameras could barely follow her. One moment she was standing still, and the next moment she was inside General's guard, too close for him to swing his massive axe. Her first strike hit the inside of his wrist, exactly where the nerves connected. The general's fingers opened without his permission, and the heavy axe fell from his grip. It crashed to the stone floor with a sound like thunder. Before he could react, struck again. Her palm hit a point on his chest, right between the armored plates. The blow was not powerful enough to hurt his stone-like body, but it sent a shock through his system that made him stumble backward. The arena fell completely silent. No one could believe what they had just seen. The tiny human girl had disarmed the mighty general in less than 2 seconds. General looked at his empty hand. His orange eyes burned with rage and confusion. In all his centuries of combat, no one had ever taken his weapon away. The axe was part of him, an extension of his will. Without it, he felt strange and incomplete. You little pest," he snarled. He swung his massive fist at her head. It was a blow that could have shattered concrete, but again, was not where he expected her to be. She moved just enough to let his fist pass by, and then she struck his elbow joint with the edge of her hand. The general's arm went numb. Pain shot through his nerves like fire. He staggered back another step, trying to understand what was happening. Did not give him time to think. She attacked in a steady flow of movements, targeting the weak points in his body. Her strikes were not powerful. She could not hurt his stone-like muscles with brute force, but she did not need to. She was attacking his nervous system, his joints, his pressure points. Every blow disrupted his balance or blocked his movements. It was like watching water slowly break down a mountain. In the human section, Professor was on his feet. "She is using the deep current technique," he said with amazement in his voice. "It takes decades to master. You cannot simply strike anywhere. You must find the exact points where the body is weakest. 1 millimeter off and the technique fails." Watched with tears in his eyes. He had always known that was special, but he had never imagined this. She was facing a monster who had destroyed armies, and she was winning. General tried to fight back, but his body was betraying him. His movements were slower. His arms felt heavy. Every time he threw a punch, would redirect it and use his own momentum against him. She made him trip over his own feet. She made him swing at empty air. She made him look clumsy and foolish. The supporters in the crowd had stopped cheering. They watched in horrified silence as their greatest warrior was humiliated by a creature half his size. But the fight was far from over. General was a survivor of 100 battles. He had fought when his body was broken. He had won when victory seemed impossible, and he was not going to let a human girl defeat him. He stopped trying to catch her. Instead, he reached deep inside himself and activated his species' secret ability. His stone-like skin began to glow with red energy. Heat radiated from his body in waves. The temperature around him rose so quickly that the stone floor began to crack and smoke. This was the Fury, a transformation that made them twice as strong and twice as fast. It burned through their life energy, but for a few minutes, they became nearly unstoppable. Felt the heat and stepped back quickly. She had read about this ability in her grandmother's notes, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. The general looked like a demon from ancient stories, a monster made of fire and rage. "Now you will die," General said. His voice was different now, deeper and rougher, like stones grinding together. "I should have done this from the beginning. I was arrogant. I underestimated you, but that ends now." He attacked with terrifying speed. His fists flew so fast that they created shockwaves in the air. The heat from his body was so intense that could feel her skin starting to burn just from being near him. She could no longer stay close. His body was too hot to touch. Every pressure point she knew was now protected by waves of heat. She had to change her strategy completely. Began to run. She moved around the arena in wide circles, staying just out of the general's reach. He chased her like a predator chasing prey, leaving a trail of burning footprints behind him. Some beings in the crowd began to laugh again. It looked like the girl was running away, trying to escape the inevitable. The supporters started chanting once more, sensing that victory was near. But noticed something that others did not see. Was not running in random directions. She was leading the general in a specific pattern, making him turn and change direction over and over again. "She's tiring him out," whispered. "The fury burns through energy. She's making him use it all up." Professor nodded slowly. "It is a dangerous strategy. If she makes one mistake, she dies. But if she can survive long enough." General was starting to feel the cost of his transformation. The fury was meant for short, decisive battles, not long chases. Every second he stayed in this state, he burned more of his life force. His movements were becoming slightly slower. The glow of his skin was becoming slightly dimmer. But he was still dangerous. He was still fast enough to kill her if she made a single error. Ran for 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. The arena watched in amazement as the tiny human girl kept just ahead of the burning monster. Her white clothes were stained with sweat and singed from the heat. Her breathing was heavy. Her legs were starting to ache. But she did not stop. She did not give up. Finally, after 20 minutes of chasing, General stumbled. The red glow of his skin flickered like a dying flame. His fury was burning out. "No," he gasped. "No, this cannot be. I am a general of the Empire. I cannot lose to. He fell to one knee. The stone floor cracked beneath his weight. His breathing came in harsh, ragged gasps. "Stopped running." She turned to face him, her chest heaving with exhaustion. Her body was covered in small burns from the time she had come too close to his heat, but her eyes were still calm. Her spirit was still unbroken. She walked toward him slowly. "You made a mistake," she said between breaths. "You thought that strength was everything. You thought that power would always win, but you forgot something important." General looked up at her. For the first time in his life he felt true fear, not fear of death. He had faced death many times, but fear of being wrong. Fear of discovering that everything he believed was a lie. "What?" he whispered. "What did I forget?" Stood in front of him. She was so tired that she could barely stay on her feet, but she forced herself to stand straight. "You forgot that the ocean wears down the mountain. You forgot that patience defeats rage. You forgot that the small and clever can overcome the large and strong." She raised her hand and placed it gently on his forehead. "You forgot that humans have been fighting for survival for thousands of years. We learned to beat enemies who were bigger, faster, and stronger. We survived ice ages and disasters. We spread across our world and then across the stars. And we did it not because we were powerful, but because we never gave up." General tried to move, tried to fight back, but his body would not respond. The fury had burned through all his strength. He was as weak as a newborn. "I have lost," he said quietly. The words felt strange in his mouth. He had never spoken them before. Nodded, but instead of striking him, instead of claiming victory with violence, she did something that shocked everyone in the arena. She offered him her hand. "Stand up," she said. "A true warrior does not stay on the ground." General stared at her hand as if it was a weapon he did not understand. In culture, defeated warriors were executed or exiled. They were never shown mercy. They were never helped to their feet. But this human girl, this tiny creature he had tried to kill, was offering him respect. Slowly, uncertainly, he reached out and took her hand. She could not lift him, he was too heavy, but she held his hand as he pushed himself up on shaking legs. When he was standing, released his hand and bowed to him deeply. "Thank you for the fight," she said. "You taught me many things about myself today." The arena was completely silent. 50,000 beings from across the galaxy watched in stunned amazement. They had expected blood and death. They had expected one fighter to destroy the other. Instead, they saw something they had never seen before. They saw mercy. They saw grace. They saw what it truly meant to be human. The silence in the arena lasted for a long time. No one knew how to react to what they had witnessed. The screens showed a general standing face to face, the tiny human girl and the massive warrior, neither one moving. Then slowly, something remarkable happened. General lifted his right fist and pressed it against his chest. It was the salute of respect, a gesture usually reserved for the greatest warriors of their empire. He bowed his head toward. "You have defeated me," he said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "Not just in combat, but in something deeper. I came here to prove that humans were weak. Instead, you have proven that I was blind." Inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. Her body was exhausted, her skin marked with burns, but she stood as straight as ever. "Victory is not about proving others weak," she replied. "It is about showing what you can become when you face your greatest challenges." General nodded slowly. The orange glow in his eyes had softened to something almost warm. "I have conquered dozens of worlds," he said. "I have broken armies and crushed rebellions. I thought I understood strength, but today I learned that I knew nothing." He turned to face the crowds, raising his voice so that everyone could hear. "People of the galaxy, witness my words. I, General of the Empire, acknowledge my defeat. The human has proven herself a worthy warrior. She has earned my respect and the respect of the Empire." The supporters in the crowd stirred uneasily. This was not how their victories or defeats usually ended. There was supposed to be blood. There was supposed to be death. They did not know how to respond to forgiveness. But then one of the older warriors stood up. He was ancient, with scars covering his gray skin and white hair flowing down his back. He was a legend among his people, a survivor of 1,000 battles. The old warrior pressed his fist to his chest and bowed toward. One by one, others followed his example. They rose from their seats and saluted the small human girl who had defeated their general. Within minutes, thousands of warriors were standing, their fists against their chests, their heads bowed in respect. In the human section was crying openly. He made no effort to hide his tears. Around him, other humans were also weeping, not from sadness, but from overwhelming pride and relief. "She did it," he whispered. "She actually did it." Professor put a hand on his shoulder. The old teacher's eyes were also wet. "She did more than win a fight," he said. "She changed how the galaxy sees humanity. This moment will be remembered for centuries." The arena officials floated down from their platform and approached. The head official, a being from a species with silver skin and many eyes, spoke in a formal voice. "By the laws of galactic combat, of Earth has won this challenge. The Empire must honor their agreement. All threatened sanctions against Earth are cancelled. Humanity's position in the galactic community is confirmed and protected." Cheers erupted from the human section. Flags waved, voices shouted, and strangers hugged each other with joy. The sound spread to other sections as species who had quietly hoped for humanity's victory joined the celebration, but did not seem to hear the cheering. She was looking at General with a thoughtful expression. "May I ask you something?" she said. The General nodded. "You have earned the right to ask anything. Why did you hate humans so much? What did we do to make you want to destroy us?" General was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and heavy with old pain. "When I was young, humans came to me as traders. They were friendly and clever, My younger brother became fascinated with them. He wanted to learn their ways, understand their culture. He left our world and went to live among humans. The general's hands tightened into fists. He died in a human city. A senseless accident. A building collapsed during construction. My brother, a warrior from the greatest empire in the galaxy, died because of human carelessness. Listened without interrupting. I blamed all of humanity for his death, continued. I told myself that they were dangerous, that they were reckless, that they did not deserve to exist among the stars. I have carried this hatred for 40 years. He looked down at. But today I understand something. My brother did not go to the humans because they were perfect. He went because he saw something in them, something special. He saw their curiosity, their passion, their refusal to accept limits. He loved those things about them. The general took a deep breath. If he could see me now, he would be ashamed. He would say that I became exactly what I accused humans of being, blind and reckless and dangerous. He would say that I used my grief as an excuse for cruelty. Reached out and touched the general's arm. It was a gentle gesture, barely more than the brush of fingertips, but it carried more meaning than words. Grief can make us lose ourselves, she said softly. It can turn love into anger and anger into hate, but it does not have to stay that way. Your brother's memory does not have to be a source of pain. It can be a source of healing. General looked at the small hand on his arm. In his entire life, no enemy had ever touched him with kindness. He did not know how to respond. You are a strange species, he said finally. You are fragile and short-lived. You feel pain and fear more deeply than any other beings in the galaxy, and yet somehow those weaknesses make you strong. Smiled slightly. They are not weaknesses. They are what make us human. We feel everything deeply, pain and joy, fear and hope, anger and love. And because we feel so much, we fight for what matters with everything we have. She stepped back and addressed the arena once more. Today was not about humanity proving our strength. It was about showing who we really are. We are a young species still learning our place in the galaxy. We make mistakes. We stumble and fall. But we always get back up. We always keep moving forward. She looked around at the thousands of different species watching her. That is the lesson I want everyone to remember. You do not have to be the strongest or the fastest or the most powerful. You just have to refuse to give up. You just have to keep fighting, keep hopping, keep believing that tomorrow can be better than today. The arena was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of beings truly listening, truly considering what they had heard. Then the old warrior who had first saluted stood up again. He spoke in a voice that was rough with age but strong with conviction. The human girl speaks truth. I have lived for 300 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. And I have learned that the greatest warriors are not those who win the most battles. They are those who know why they fight. He pointed at. This child knows why she fights. She fights for love. She fights for her people. She fights for a future she may never see. That is something they have forgotten. That is something we must learn again. The old warrior looked at General. Go home, tell our people what happened here today. Tell them that we found something precious in the last place we expected. Tell them that humans are not our enemies, they are our teachers. General nodded slowly. For the first time in decades, something like peace settled over his features. I will tell them, he said. I will tell everyone. He turned back to and extended his massive hand. Perhaps in another lifetime we could have been friends. Perhaps if my brother had lived, he would have found someone like you. Took his hand and shook it. Perhaps in this lifetime we can still be friends. The past does not have to determine the future. The general held her hand for a moment longer. Then he released it, gathered his soldiers, and walked toward the eastern gate. Just before he disappeared through the doorway, he turned back one last time. Farewell of Earth. May your path be long and your spirit remain strong. Farewell, General. May you find the peace you are looking for. The gate closed behind him. Within minutes, had pushed through the crowd and rushed onto the arena floor. He ran to and caught her just as her legs finally gave out. She collapsed against him, exhausted beyond words. You did it, he said, holding her tight. You actually did it. Smiled weakly. Her eyes were already closing. I told you I was not afraid, she whispered. You lied, you said you were scared. Smile grew slightly wider. I was, but I did it anyway. That is what being brave means. She fell asleep in his arms while 50,000 beings watched. The tiny human girl who had faced a monster and won. The quiet student who had changed the course of galactic history. As carried her toward the medical center, the crowd began to chant her name. It started softly, just a few voices at first, but it grew louder and louder until the entire arena was thundering with a single word. And somewhere in the stars, watching from a place beyond time and space, a grandmother with silver hair and sparkling eyes smiled proudly at her granddaughter. Well done, little one, she whispered across the void. Well done. The galaxy would never forget this day. They would tell stories about the human girl who did not wince. They would write songs about her courage and her mercy. And for generations to come, whenever someone felt afraid, they would remember and find the strength to face their fears. Because that is what humans do. They endure, they adapt, they survive. And they never, ever give up.